One type of work that's always interested me in the sports industry ever since I got started was the potential to work with athletes one-on-one on their creative content and visual branding. I feel like a lot of people assume that the main ways and the only ways really of finding work in this industry is through working with professional teams or leagues, but in my experience and by seeing a lot of other people take this route, I actually think one of the most underrated ways to find opportunity and work in this industry is to work directly with the athletes themselves. Now, social media and content is obviously a way for athletes to showcase their lifestyle and their brands and to communicate to their fans, but also it gives them an opportunity to attract sponsors using their brand and their lifestyle to potentially earn more money down the line. Knowing this, I've always made it a priority for myself to work with an athlete whenever the opportunity presents itself. Over the last few months, I've had a really cool opportunity to step out of my comfort zone as a creative and work in a completely brand new sport, having the opportunity to collaborate with UFC fighter Michael Malott and his team on his branded content, as well as producing, directing, and shooting a short documentary as he prepares to fight at UFC 297 in January. And I've learned so much, not just about the sport through this process, but what it actually takes to work with a professional athlete one-on-one, which is what I'm going to talk about in today's video. Before we dive into it though, I do want to take a few minutes to thank and introduce the sponsor of today's video, Riverside. Whether you're a podcaster, a filmmaker, or a social media content creator, Riverside FM is one of the best tools out there in order to plan, record, and execute on high-level social media content, and something that I actually use almost on a daily basis to create things like these YouTube videos and also produce higher-end projects. Riverside is a fully functioning online studio platform which allows you to create a variety of content within its interface, anything from podcasts to talking head interviews, all while recording it in high-end quality 4K video with fantastic audio quality as well. My favorite thing about Riverside though is the fact that it is much more than just a podcast or audio recording interface. It's actually become one of my go-to platforms for hosting and recording pre-production calls with clients and my colleagues, and also something I've used a ton in production for this documentary that I'm about to talk about in this video. Riverside has such a great range of features that allow it to be one of the most flexible platforms out there for creating both long-form and short-form content. From instant AI-powered transcriptions to very effective text-based editing, Riverside allows you to find and use the best parts of your calls and recordings almost immediately, ready to use in whatever manner suits your needs. These amazing features are exactly how I've been personally using Riverside recently in the production of the documentary that I'm doing for this professional athlete. I've used Riverside to host and record all my pre-production and pre-interview calls, allowing me to go back to them at a moment's notice if I need them at any point throughout the production process. I'm a really big fan of their new feature, AI Show Notes, which effortlessly generates an entire summary of the call and adds key markers to the rest of the recording, allowing me to spend less time actually scrubbing through the recording itself and focusing on the most important moments for the documentary. Not only is Riverside FM fantastic for long-form content, but it's also one of the most efficient tools I've ever used for creating short-form videos as well. Features like AI Magic Clips will automatically cut your long-form content into short-form pieces, making it one of the most efficient tools I've ever used for creating short-form social media videos. If you guys are interested in checking out and learning more about Riverside, I'll be sure to leave the link to them down below, and also feel free to use my special code down there for an exclusive discount to start using Riverside today. Finally, a big thank you to Riverside for sponsoring today's video. So this whole situation of me working with a UFC athlete actually came because of a previous connection I had in the creative industry, where a friend of mine, oddly enough, who is also named Michael, reached out to me as he was looking for someone to work with on the content creation and creative direction side of things for an agency he started out for combat athletes named Dear Combat. Just to clear things up and make it easier to follow, if I say Michael, I'm actually referring to my friend Michael. And if I say Mike, I'm referring to Mike, the UFC fighter. So just hopefully you guys can follow that. So me and Michael connected a few years ago purely just on Instagram, and after being internet friends for what felt like an eternity, he ended up offering me an opportunity to come help on set with him and one of his athletes. And ever since then, we remained in very close touch. And eventually he mentioned he had a few athletes that had UFC level fights coming up, which is then when I kind of hopped on the opportunity and offered my services as a content creator to provide content and creative direction for his brand and his athletes. Since then, we've been working very closely, developing and shooting content on a weekly basis for all of his fighters and professional athletes based here in Ontario. Lately, it's been primarily working with the aforementioned Mike Malott, who just happens to be one of the best UFC prospects coming into Canada in recent years and happens to have a fight coming up here in Toronto at UFC 297 in January. Over the last 3 months, we've been basically shooting on a weekly basis, shooting his training sessions, documenting his process, and also interviewing him and his coaches in order to develop a short documentary talking about his process in preparing for UFC 297. The point I'm trying to get across here is I want to make sure you guys understand that utilizing your network and the people you know in order to find opportunities like this is one of the best things you can do in order to set yourself up for success. Michael was simply just an Instagram friend at one point, but I knew he had access and relationships with high-level athletes, so by utilizing the network I already had with him when the time was right, I just offered my value and services to him and his agency, offering value as a content creator, which then gets me to this position now where I'm working with him and his athletes on a weekly basis creating content for them. I've made this point before, but you can't just just wait around and expect opportunities to come to you. Sometimes you have to go knocking, you have to utilize your network, reach out and offer value with the skills you have as a content creator. Offering value to people is exactly how someone like Michael has built a roster of athletes that he works with on a daily basis. And it's proof that even if you're reaching out to the athlete directly or through their management or to anyone else really, offering value is one of the small things you can do to set yourself apart. Instead of just saying, hey, what's up? I like what you do. I want to work with you. You can just say, hey, I actually want to provide value to you and see how I can benefit you and your brand. Doing that small little language change can make a big difference and get you in situations like this to work with high-level athletes and even brands beyond that. Now, people like Michael who work with the athletes directly and the athletes themselves probably have a ton of people reaching out to them in order to work with them. So the one thing is, if you're going to utilize your network, make sure you are offering value to them through your content creation skills. And this is something I've done, like in this situation, to immediately set myself apart and give myself the opportunity to work with these people directly. Now, I want to talk a little bit here about my approach and my process with working with professional athletes, because if you haven't done it before, it can be a little bit different than it is from working like from the team perspective or working with a league. So hopefully you guys can pick up a thing or two if this is something you want to pursue. Now, first things first, what I've learned through working with athletes in the past is knowing that you have to treat them and their time with respect. I know as a content creator, we get really excited about these big opportunities, but I think you need to keep in mind that the priority for you and this individual is not the content that you're creating, it's the goal and the objective that the athlete is working towards. And the main thing to keep in mind here is that you're making sure you're balancing the ability to document and create content using the time they're giving to you, but also you're not getting in the way or interfering with any other day-to-day activities or their busy schedule. Now, typically a lot of professional athletes will have a pretty regimented schedule, which means you're gonna have to work around a lot of things: training schedules, recovery schedules, commitments for sponsors, commitments to media, which means you might not get all the time in the world or the time you were hoping for in terms of creating content with this athlete. As a creative, it then kind of presents the challenge of filling in the gaps and getting as much coverage and content as possible with the time you're given. I've had athletes in the past offer me an hour or two of their time, and that hour suddenly becomes 20 minutes because of a previous commitment or something coming up. And even though this can be an incredibly frustrating situation to be in, especially if you have a lot of ideas that you want to offer them, you need to remember that the priority is the athlete and the goal they're trying to achieve, and that's always going to take importance over the content you're trying to create. Ultimately, you just don't want to get in the way of the athlete trying to achieve their goal. In my situation, I don't want to be the factor that potentially makes or breaks Mike Malott losing his fight when it comes in January. I want to put him in the best situation to succeed, because at the end of the day, I know if he's comfortable and he's doing his thing, this is only going to positively affect the content I'm creating for him, and something that he'll hopefully appreciate when it all comes full circle. The next thing I want to talk about, and one of the biggest things I found in my situation for creating good content with athletes, is not just taking the time to obviously put a camera in their face and shoot with them, but also take the time to build trust and establish a relationship with them. A positive relationship and a lot of trust goes a long way, especially if you're hanging around an athlete and their people and you want to capture their process. The more they trust you, the more comfortable you're going to be with them, and that's only going to benefit you in the long run. Now, athletes can be very guarded people by nature and typically won't be used to a complete stranger with a camera hanging around them all the time, which is why one of the most important things you can do to make sure everyone is comfortable, especially the athlete, because remember, what they're doing is the most important thing here, is set a level of trust and expectations with them, their coaches, and anyone else around them, so they know exactly who you are, what you're there to do, and how you're going to do it. And that's going to put a lot of people at ease, especially the athlete, and it's only going to translate positively to your relationship moving forward. Being clear and concise goes a long way here. Make sure that they know that you aren't trying to get in the way, that you want to respect the space and their process that they have, and you simply just want to step back and document whatever they're doing. These types of reassurances set you up for success, because you're showing yourself as someone who has the athlete's best interest in mind, and someone who only wants to contribute to their journey and process to whatever they want to achieve in a positive manner. In my situation with Mike Malott, I was lucky enough that my friend Michael was able to sign off for me and say that I'm a positive person to have around and someone that won't get in the way. But make sure you're having these discussions and make sure the athlete knows this beforehand, just so you're not caught in an awkward position at any point where something happens to go wrong. I typically will let the athlete know that if there's anything they don't want recorded or showcased, just let me know. And a lot of the times, opening up this clear line of communication allows them to get comfortable with you, and that comfort can go a long way, especially when it comes to the access that they're willing to give you. And also, they're probably much more willing to be themselves in front of camera and let you publish that as well. When you cross this threshold of comfort and trust is when you're able to capture much more candid moments with the athlete, and then that way you're able to create much deeper and more impactful content. People all the time ask me how I get athletes to talk and act in front of the camera, and it really is just taking the time to build this trust and level of comfort with them, something that I've experienced grow so much more with Mike Malott over the last few months of shooting him, where at first he wouldn't really react in front of the camera, and now he's talking with me halfway through his training sessions, giving me insight on his mindset, and that at the end of the day is making a huge difference in the type of content that I'm trying to produce for him. client.
That kind of motivation to push like crazy because you have a monumental moment coming up. For some guys, it's fuel to train harder and to get the hard rounds in and to make sure you've done everything and you've turned every stone. But at the same time, you have to recognize that there's only so much you can do.
The last thing I want to talk about is also a really important lesson I've learned through this whole process of working with professional athletes, and that is to make sure that no matter who you're reaching out to, whether it's an athlete, a content creator, an influencer, or even a celebrity, make sure when you're reaching out, come to the table with ideas ready to go in your back pocket. There is a huge difference when it comes to reaching out with ideas ready to go that you can execute on immediately if they like them, and then just reaching out to someone and saying you want to shoot for them. There is a big difference in the value you're offering, and oftentimes the more ideas and the more prep you have when you're reaching out, the more chance you're going to catch this person's eye and impress them and potentially have them bring you into the fold to be a content creator for them in the long run. Now, when I offered my services to my friend Michael in the Deer Combat agency he runs, I knew very well that putting myself in the best situation possible would be coming to the table with ideas. Knowing he runs an agency working with professional athletes, there are probably a ton of other creators and people who want to work with him and the athletes he works with. So I knew very well coming to the table with several different options was the best way to catch his eye. And I think arguably that the short documentary I threw his way and that we're now working on was the one that convinced him to bring me along to work directly with Mike Malott. The short documentary idea was also the main way he convinced Mike to let me come around and document his prep for UFC 297. So not only was having ideas instrumental in convincing his management, but also the athlete themselves. Now, your idea doesn't have to be as broad or as big as a short film or a documentary. It can literally be as simple as offering something like, a gallery of photos from a training session, or offering to edit them a cool social media hype video or something along those lines. The main point I'm trying to get across here is whenever you're going to reach out, come with something to offer in order to set yourself apart from other people who potentially want to work with the same athlete you're reaching out to. These days, I'm finding more and more creatives are struggling with the concept of pitching themselves to clients because of the language they use. And this is a whole topic that I can make a full video on in the future, but there's one takeaway I want you to make here, and that is how you offer your services as a creative can make a huge difference in how people respond to your outreach. I'm going to give you guys one communication red flag that I think you guys should avoid at all costs. So please, I beg, I plead, I urge you, do not send these messages when you're reaching out to someone. And that specific message or messages are, yo, what's going on? Let's shoot. Or, hey, can I come shoot for you sometimes? Please don't say those because they don't help you at all. While there's nothing wrong with shooting your shot in terms of finding opportunities in this industry and something that I will always support people and wholeheartedly say you should do, these types of messages literally do not benefit the person you are asking. At the end of the day, if you're just asking someone, hey, can I come shoot for you? It kind of comes off as a bit of a selfish request because you're not actually offering anything to them and you're just kind of asking and hoping for, access for no particular reason. At the end of the day, a small change to your language here and saying, hey, I would actually love to pitch you this idea and offer value to you and your brand and benefit you guys in XYZ way can be much more impactful than the original messages I just talked about. This will go a long way in terms of you finding opportunities in this industry and catching the eye of people and organizations you potentially want to work with. I've learned so much over the last 3 months working with Mike, my friend Michael, and the Deer Combat brand on their content ahead of UFC 297 that really gives me a firsthand experience of understanding the differences between working with an athlete and then working with a team or a league through my other experiences working with the NHL and previously working with the Leafs and the Raptors. And I think primarily the one reason I really enjoy it and I want to do more of it is because of the creative freedom you get with athletes and with these people, which is something I really value, is being able to bring ideas to the table and actually execute upon them, which you don't really get to do a lot of the times when you work for different organizations or bigger entities. Now, because of the era of social media and content creation we live in, it would not surprise me in the slightest if there are a lot of different athletes out there looking to hire content creators like you and I to work with them directly on their social media content. So make sure you're shooting your shot, you're sending out those messages and offering value to these people, because you may be surprised at the number of them that might actually take you up on this and work with you in the future. In my situation right now, working with Deer Combat and Mike Malott, we have about a month and a half until fight night. So the next few weeks are actually going to be really heavily dedicated to editing the documentary. So I'm going to keep you guys updated here on my YouTube channel on that process and eventually break down how I shot and created the documentary from start to finish. But I hope for the time being, you guys took something away from my experiences and learned a thing or two about potentially working with a professional athlete and whether or not it's something you'd like to do. If you guys enjoyed today's video, if you guys learned or took anything away from it, please give it a like down below. And if you guys have any questions about what it's like working with professional athletes or how you guys can best set yourself up for success to work with an athlete one day. Leave me your questions, leave me your comments down below, and I'll be sure to get to them as soon as possible. One more thing, if you guys are enjoying this content and haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing it below. We experienced a huge jump in growth on the channel in the last year. We started off 2023 with about 3,000 subscribers, and we're finishing 2023 heading into 2024 with just about 6,300 of you. So a huge jump in subscriber count, which I really appreciate. It's incredibly motivating. And so if you've been here since day one, if you subbed in the last few months or even in the last few days, just know your support is very much appreciated. And I'm excited to bring you guys more of this content in the new year. And that does it for me in this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.